Hi guys!
Hello everyone,
We're Queerzicle
and I'm Martin.
and I'm Scarlett, and today we are here with THRASH, which comprises of 6 second year fine art students from Nottingham Trent University.
And we have been collaborating with THRASH for the Republic Festival, which is a festival put on by their course where all the students have got together and put on events and exhibitions completely by themselves.
So for our collaboration with THRASH, we have given the theme of Spectrum, which they have responded to through their artwork, which they are showing next Wednesday in Nottingham at the Pete Spowridge Gallery. So first of all, we want to explain kind of why we've chosen the theme of Spectrum. So Spectrum we see as a notion which can define loads and loads of things. So within that we've got the idea of gender, we've got the idea of homosexuality, and it just kind of being a way to look at certain notions as fluid. So it's not strict. The thing can kind of move from one thing to another, and that's why a spectrum, like
so
a
when we're
timeline.
talking about gender, we're talking about spectrum between being high feminine and high masculine.
Exactly.
And everything between.
So for example, me and Martin, boy and female biologically, but once you put yourself on the spectrum, we might not necessarily be hyper masculinity or hyper femininity. So say if we had -3 being hyper masculinity and 3 being hyper femininity and 0 being in the middle, kind of non-binary, neither masculine nor female, just kind of a neutral gender. I mean, where would you put yourself? What's the personal question?
I would say I'm -1.
You're -1, yeah, so you're quite in the middle, and I'd probably say I was about 1.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that would be completely different for lots of naturally born females and naturally born males as well.
And actually there might be naturally born female who would identify themselves as being more masculine than feminine and the other way around.
You might have someone born biologically female, whatever that is, that have all the female reproductory system, the right gonads, the vagina, the uterus, blah, 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 the chromosomes, all those biological things that might define you as female, but actually they might go, do you know what, I'm -3 and that's what I identify
So
as.
I would say there is difference between sex and gender when sex is biological thing and gender is a social construct.
But equally in both of them we are kind of saying, you know, we shouldn't be limiting anyone's identity. It's not something like race, which at the moment is kind of argues whether it's a flexible notion. Where it comes to gender, I think we both definitely think it's a self-prescribed identity, and whatever you naturally feel like, no one should stop that. And actually what we want to really talk about is how everything that we have about gender, so masculinity and femininity, might not be entirely natural.
Yeah.
So,
And I feel it is important to discuss this because there are loads of people who don't fit in, so they were born as boys or girls but they don't necessarily feel that way, and they might feel discriminated or just not fit in.
yeah, and then the fact that in everyday life, in so many political, job, just social situations, we have your gender already describing or like predetermining how well you're going to do or your success. And if we're having gender as something that's restricting people of their own identity and their flourishing in life and their lifestyle, then clearly I think we need to have a revision of what our concept of gender is, because it shouldn't be restrictive. It should be, you know, how like we are about being British or being gay and those other things, like we should feel the same about our gender. So if you want to identify as a female, you should do so and you should be proud, and it shouldn't come with like a massive weight of patriarchal annoyances and those kind of things. So shall we open up about art? So you guys, why is art important and what can you do with Spectrum?
So yeah, I think art is important because it's not just about self-expression visually through your artwork. It's essentially sort of a manifestation of what you believe in, what's important to you, and it's sort of getting it across to other people through your artwork. And I think with art, it is very important to sort of discuss these things through artwork visually, sort of provoking these sort of questions and things you wouldn't usually think about, and opening up to other people, basically. Yeah. And I think with spectrum, I think there is a lot of ignorance surrounding gender as a social construct. So yeah,
did you guys kind of, you knew about like feminism and like transsexuality, and you knew those kind of terms, but maybe have you learnt something different from this? Like,
yeah, I think it's very, very open, and you know, straight away you are shown just like a piece of gender, and you aren't shown the full thing, and then you actually start to look and research, and you see that there's so much on this spectrum, and it's not like, you know, necessarily shown straight away, and you know, it is really quite a deep tunnel.
Yeah, I think responding to spectrum, it sort of made me understand sort of how other people see it as well, just through research, just looking on the internet at what people think. So yeah, like I remember seeing this sort of diagram on the internet. When you Google like list of genders, it came up with the diagram with all the different lists. I was like over 30, and someone had circled the two genders, female and male, and put genders, and the rest they circled and put mental disorders. And it just sort of shows that there is a lot of ignorance, because people don't understand the difference between sex, like biological sex, and gender as a social construct. And reading these sort of like Reddit posts saying like, no, there's only two genders, it's because of ignorance, because they don't understand, and sort of like feeding that into other people and stuff, and then other people think that as well, and it's just not, yeah, it's just not great.
So you were all born as females. Do you always identify yourselves as super feminine, or you went to a point in your life when you felt more masculine, or you felt like you don't fit into like feminine?
I'd say, you know, saying like the -3 and the 3 sort of thing. Like I think, like growing up, like being around brothers, like I've got brothers, I'd always put myself in the middle. Like I'd never say that I'd be like very feminine in any way. But I think about what you're saying in the workspace, like how with the males, how they're sort of like with their egos and everything, they'd sort of be sort of, they'd go for it straight away, and then the feminine, like you wouldn't go for it, you know.
Yeah,
what you're
less
saying?
confidence.
Less confidence,
just
like very less confident. And I think it should be like that. And I think from what you've said today, like it's like broadened. I feel like just from that, I've like changed my views completely. And without that, I would have been. So I think it's just so important to talk about it. Like that's what I think.
And also, I think to be super, like in those kind of things, we can sometimes say the wrong thing as well. Like when you said other points where you might have felt masculine, and then we've gone, well, masculinity often shows confidence in workspaces and applying for things, and then I certainly wouldn't want to be like, well, that's the time that I felt masculine was when I was confident, because then what we're saying, that you have to be timid and shy to be a female, that's kind of doing exactly what we're trying to say. It doesn't happen, but that's where we kind of go into that, well, why do people attribute confidence to masculinity, and why would showing masculine traits make you feel confident? And that's kind of where we've gone down with the social studies.
Loads of people see this thing as natural for certain gender, but actually we just made them that way.
Yeah, so shall we talk about the ramp with kids? So there was a study, can't remember any specific details apart from really what it says about gender, and it was these tiny babies, and they had like mothers, they had nurses, anyone that would work around children or have children around them all the time, and they'd have boy babies and girl babies and a ramp, and they'd say, well, what do you predict will be how far the baby gets up the ramp? And in pretty much all of the boy cases, they'd overestimate how far the child was going to go, even if it was their own son. And when it came to the girl babies, they'd always underestimate. And it
just tells us loads about the bias we have towards gender.
Yeah, and it's the same with language. Like you'll be like, oh, pretty little girl, from a very small age. With the babies, you would be saying things like pretty and sweet, whereas
don't cry like a girl.
Don't cry like
don't
a girl. Or my strong soldier, when you've got your your little boy, and those kind of things, even though they seem really innocent and sweet, you know, you, like we were saying, micro amounts of like sexism from that age, even though it doesn't seem as sexism, it is going to be enforcing feminine traits and masculine traits, and you are only then giving those babies certain options.
And also I would say in today's society, being feminine is perceived as something negative. So even inside, like, for example, LGBTQ community, or in a group of gay boys, being feminine is seen something as unattractive or
And
less
even with
valued.
the gays,
Yeah.
lesbians are the lowest of the low. You know, it's definitely gay men that have become mainstream. You're like, when you think of gay people, you're thinking token, handbag, best friend that's going to go shopping with you. It has taken until probably Orange is the New Black, really,
Yeah.
for lesbians to get any sort of mainstream attention. That does have a massive effect in society as well. Like, it does always just seem that anything that is the woman version, it's always harder for it to like break through, for it to get mainstream, for it to be
so
accepted.
even in community like LGBTQ+,
You're seeing the
which should be
division.
like super accepting,
Yeah.
you see
No,
that they are not
It's
always
divide.
aware.
100%. And we thought spectrum could be used in art, like you were saying. It is definitely a kind of platform which wants to explore new things, and like we were saying, even in the LGBT community, which is supposed to be like super clued up and know exactly what's going on, and you still have ignorance and you still have these problems and people not quite understanding like simple differences between like pronouns. There's people are still like in Celebrity Big Brother, they're going, oh, he, she, what, you know, and it is rude and it's offensive, and even people within the community don't quite understand it. So we thought art would be a great place to get that across, because it is always a good place to start. Isn't it?
Also, when we're talking about spectrum, we are not talking only about being highly feminine or highly masculine, but there is also like a middle or natural center. So loads of people might not identify themselves as either male or female, and that's absolutely all right.
But it does look like that we can't accept that, because we're always told, well, gender's
One
this
way or
binary thing,
another.
so you've got to be one or the other. You know, you, at no point could you, because that's different. That's not what we're being told. But I do think that's got a lot to do with the big P word, the patriarchy that we're all terrified of. Because, you know, I feel that being feminine was used as a way to control. If you were feminine, you were being the best type of female, but like by virtue of being feminine, you were passive and you were inferior to the male. So it's like a really vicious cycle that those rich white men really nailed onto, because if you wanted to be a good female, you had to be super feminine, and to be super feminine meant that you had to be passive, and you know, so you weren't gonna. That's why I think feminism has such a struggle, because like girls turn on girls. Girls are your worst nightmare. Like you were saying with your female boss, I think that's the thing. Like Margaret Thatcher turned on her own gender so she'd get that role. Because if you're looking around and you've got a world dominated by men, it's sometimes hard for all the girls. Because if it's 50% boys, 50% girls, we could all just go, come on, let's beat them, but we don't. It's not what we do. And I think it is because the definition of femininity is to be passive and is to be inferior. So that's why we don't turn to each other, because that's not kind of what's like taught of us to be.
Do, yeah.
So then you feel like you're being a bad female when you don't want to do that. So you just don't. You just let it happen.
I think that's really good that we're kind of bringing that conversation into art, because I think within art we have this freedom to do whatever we want to do, and subjects like that are so intense need to be shared in a way, and I think being artists, we have that platform to kind of do that some way.
Yeah, I think it is a good way of bringing awareness and just helping sort of people understand, because anyone can look at art. Like, you don't need to be like super educated or just anyone can look at art, basically. You don't have to be a certain type of person.
You take the time, like, because you can just look at it and, like, as I was saying, like, if there was an obvious one, like, you'd pick that up, I think, rather than going and, like, saying this talk, like, some people wouldn't take the time to do that, so it's just a nice way of having a visual aspect to, like, sort of get to terms with it, sort of thing.
And that would be, like, the most beautiful thing to come out of, like, what I would like gender to progress to be, which is just really, really simple and naturally, like, you do you, honey, like, whatever you want to be, whatever point of that scale, like, that's what, and there's nothing stopping you, and politically that's accepted and socially that's accepted, so it shouldn't be super complicated. Like, we can talk and talk and talk about it, but really all it should be is whoever you like. It's not hurting anyone. Who's it hurting if you were born with a penis but you're like, no, I want long hair and to be, you know, like, it shouldn't be anything stopping you. I think that's so it'd be the same in art, really. It should be able to be kind of it's a shame that we have to explain it, I think, even though it's super important too, because we do have this ignorance, but that's a shame, isn't it?
Do you think it is changing?
Yeah, slowly.
I think
Definitely.
it is definitely getting more mainstream, and it is more discussed than it was in past. But again, I think often it just misinterprets it.
Yeah, like we were saying earlier, that it's almost worrying that, yes, like, trans people, trans community is being seen and it's being accepted, as in it's being allowed, but no one's really asking why, and no one's giving any time to really work it out. So all you get is like a space in the sphere of a community opened, but all of the problems are still there, all the history and the oppression and the misunderstandings are still there. So you're not actually going to progress that far, because no one's looked at it, no one's looked at the nature to, like, use it as a platform for learning and curiosity. And so there's only so far that you can really progress in that sense, because you've still got the trans community all being generalized into one sort of thing. They're still taking a massive proportion of the very, like, lowest class, because jobs aren't taking them. Like, they might start a job, but then the bullying in the workplace makes them lose, like, if they're finding it really hard to keep up jobs. I also think that, like, feminism is at an all-time low, like first wave, second wave, like, there was a large proportion of females that wanted to do it, and when I ran for women's officer, we didn't actually get it, but I ran. The biggest thing was, well, why? What's the point? What's the need for it? And
Why there is
no males officer?
Yeah.
On who did I have this conversation? I had a conversation with someone.
Maybe we had it on
Where
our
did I
show
go
before.
yesterday? I don't know. This week, apparently, on International Women's Day, the most googled thing is, when is International Men whatever they are,
Day.
Men Day, and then any other day of the year, it's probably the least researched thing. Like, men only want their day when the female's getting it, but then they don't actually need it. They don't actually want it.
I think there is one, to be honest.
There is one, but no one Googles it. But on the day that it's International Women's Day, it is the most Googled thing.
Like, when is it my turn coming up?
Yeah, probably just thinking because I want to be
What
better.
about
I need
me?
some of my one is.
Yeah, why is that female getting something? What about me? And like we were saying about equality, so if feminism is, like, everyone's going, oh well, feminism's fighting for equality, but, you know, it's not really equal because you all want to be better than men. Well, if you're not given the same starting opportunities, because things like you being discouraged from certain subjects or achieving certain goals, then you can't be both expected to have the same rights and that give you the same status, because you've already got those unequal starting opportunities. So feminism really needs to bring about, like, that extra, like, leg up for women, so we can get to the same position, so we can be equal. Like, people go, well, that's not equal, but that's because you've started there and there, so it'd be stupid for you both to, like, go up that amount because you're still unequal. So you need to kind of even it out first to
Make it equal.
Like, would you guys define yourselves as feminists, or, like, have you received negativity about being a feminist and all those kind of stereotypes? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say I'm a feminist, but every single time I bring it up, it's like, I somehow think that I'm better than any man, and that's not what I want at all. I wanted to be treated equally and have the same opportunities. You know, the fact that like I'm not allowed, like from my own mum, I'm not allowed to walk around when it gets to a certain time, but my brother who's younger than me, he is, and it's just things like that. And then you say that to people and they're like, oh well, like that's just you and your circumstances, and it's just like, why is wanting to be treated equals a negative thing? And it's just so frustrating, and it's just, and I think it gets made fun of a lot, and people pick like jokes with you, and it's just like, okay, it's funny, but this is an issue. And it's like, I'm not a crazy person because I'm a feminist, and I think the media as well, it does like has such a negative approach to being a feminist, and it's just, it's not right.
Yeah, there is like a picture of angry feminist.
Angry, hairy, lesbian. Yeah. I mean, they exist. They do, but then are they, or maybe they are taking up the proportion of feminists out there, but that's because other people aren't interested, and people aren't
even
stepping
I
up.
think it is perceived by a majority of the people like, you don't want to be like them, look at them.
Yeah,
They
but
are
that's
not
a negative
females
thing.
you want to be.
And again, that kind of goes into what we define femininity as. Like, if being a feminist is being assertive and out there and actually going, look, there's something wrong, well, that's the opposite to being passive and opposite to being inferior to a male. So again, on that patriarchal definition of femininity, to be a feminist would be going against that. So I think that's also got a massive thing to do with it.
I think from a young age, my dad's always tried to encourage me not to be a feminist. So I've always been really anti-feminism, but I think it wasn't until I moved to university and actually heard other people's opinions and realised what it was actually about. I think I'm a lot more open-minded to it now, and I wouldn't wholly say that I was anti-feminism. Like, I'd encourage equality. I wouldn't encourage the angry ones, but
they're just trying to get their message out there.
Yeah, I'm quite pissed off that I was brought up in like a background where it was a bad thing to be a feminist.
That means you've come a long way, though.
Yeah. Well, I was a bit against it all before. Like, not against it, like I would always say like I didn't mind people that were feminist, but I'd always go, oh, like, I'm not a feminist. But then you'd always say, but you kind of are, because the things that I'd find annoying, like how a guy would speak to me or something, like the way I'd react to that would make me a feminist because I was standing up for myself.
Yeah.
Which I never saw it in that way because of
the small levels. Is that what you mean? Like, that just like having to have a friend walk you back, but boys don't have to. And, you know, just tiny things that, it's not changing your life completely, but you're a bit like, oh, well, why me and not that person? Just little things that.
But I think I do kind of follow those kind of made out rules. Like, I wouldn't want to walk home on my own, but then that's just because I.
But that's because you're not in a situation where you
safe.
can.
Yeah.
But society shouldn't be in that case, and it's obviously. There's things that would be stupid, so it would be silly probably walking home. I think also as a boy, but you know the kind of expectation that if you see another boy, then that's when you get nervous, and that is based on evidence, and that is based on, or like boys will be boys. When you're in the club and, you know, a boy might react a certain way to you, grab you, like, there's horrible things that happen. Or when you might share a bed with a friend that's a male when you're younger, like after a party or something, and they might like continue to try it on, and you said no persistently, but they carry on, and then the next morning you go to your friends and you're like, oh look, like that person did this and I feel this way, and it's that classic.
Like, why are you being boring?
Why are you being frigid? Like, it's those kind of little things that you don't realise, and then you look back on and you're like, oh, that's a bit annoying. Like,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you think men can be feminists?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I think they should be. I am a feminist.
You're a feminist. You're a male. There we go.
Because like I've got this question before, like, oh, you can't be feminist, you're a man, but doesn't
You're
change
there
anything.
proving difference.
Because
yeah.
you are for equality.
I think it's really easy for you to say to someone like, I'm a feminist, and them to come back at you and say, oh, so you hate men. But
Yeah.
it's like, it's not about that, because you just said yourself,
Yeah.
like, you're a feminist, and there's so much more to it than, it's not about hating men. If we all hated men, it'd be as bad as each other.
Mhm.
There's so much more to it than that.
It's quite easy to be labelled as like a bit of a psycho if you're like feminist, because you're quite passionate, whereas it's like you shouldn't be thought of like that, because you're just like, yeah, it actually matters.
Also, when we were talking about that picture of aggressive feminists, I think like some people might see it as negative, but I think we need it,
Oh yeah.
because when you fight against patriarchy and
need
you
to
want
make
to be
an
heard,
impact.
you have to be loud.
Yeah, I mean, like, how did we get the vote? They threw themselves in front of horses, and they went into jail, and they starved themselves. And sometimes you do need a bit of an impact to get that kind of equality. But I really just think feminism is more powerful when you just get lots and lots of people questioning, like, why being a girl is seen as inferior, and why being a girl makes you less confident, and why being a girl makes you a victim in the club. Like, why having emotions and crying and being sensitive is seen as negative, and why being assertive and boisterous is seen as good. Like, all of those things should be questioned, and I literally think feminism is going, well, why? And is this unfair? Well, yeah, we're getting paid less for those things, or anyone that shows the feminine traits is probably going to be getting paid less. So the same with gay men and those kind of things. Like, it doesn't have to be about being a girl. It's going, well, why is femininity, like, those kind of skills, like to be able to listen to people, care for people, reason, those are such good skills, but we put them to the bottom and we don't question it. It's like the you know, the IQ test was used to like at the very beginning of the IQ test, females used to always come out on top. So the men changed the actual questions in the test because they realised there was different reasoning between female and male brains. So they changed it so that men always did better, because they didn't like the fact that women were always doing better in the IQ test. Honey?
What about that?
Yeah, I think feminism is not just about, you know, it's not how the media sort of portrays it as like angry females who hate males. I think feminism is about recognising these issues, these like small things that are really important. And it's like, do you know the Wonder Woman film? It was a female director.
Yeah.
She sort of slated, I think, an article, like a newspaper article about her, because they said they put female director, and she was sort of saying, by you saying female director, it's undermining it, undermines it, because it should just be a director. Like, it's not important now.
If it
female.
would be a male, they wouldn't say a male director.
Yeah,
That is
exactly.
100% true. Yeah. The fact that it becomes a surprise, like, oh, finally, a woman did something fine, or being really good at your job and the reviews being like, well, didn't they look lovely? Or what a lovely dress.
It is really good movie considering it was directed by a female.
Like, my mum said she started just recently looking at this director who used to work quite close to here with the Shakespearean Institute, and she ended up killing herself really early on because apparently it was amazing. Like, all of her shows are incredible. She was an amazing director, and every single review was about her body, was about her appearance. And it wasn't until after she died that people were like, well, actually, that was amazing theatre, that was amazing work that she was doing, and people were just judging her on what she looked like. And it's so true for any sort of thing in, like, anything in media or anything that's in the public eye. Like, if you're wanting to be a journalist or a presenter, if you're a male, you just have to be really good at communicating and presenting and having a talent in, like, your skills have to be what a good presenter can do. For a female, you have to look a certain way, and then they will judge you on that. So you're always judged differently. Like air hostesses,
they're always going to be sexualised women.
It's always sexualised.
But
always.
for men, it's not about that.
No. So if you're having to put more time in, like girls having to wear makeup, I think is like so fine if you want to, and if it's an expression. Like, see it as a canvas, like you guys do art, like it can be so fun. But if you're having every morning to wake up 40 minutes earlier because you don't feel like you can go out without makeup, well then we can question that. We can think, well, what's that actually saying? And then if every woman has to do